What you're looking at here is not Wisconsin. This is video from Indianapolis today. Protesters in that traditionally pretty conservative state rallied today under the banner "Hoosiers Standing Up for the Middle Class." Thousands of people turned out at the state capitol in Indianapolis today to protest against not only union-stripping measures that Indiana Republicans introduced last month, but also efforts by Republicans to shift a massive amount of public school resources into private hands. That's going on in Indiana. Now this is Wisconsin. This was the scene at the Wisconsin State Capitol today. Thousands of people gathered again to protest the biggest rolling back of workers' rights in that state in the state's history. Last night, in the blink of an eye, Republicans in the Wisconsin Senate wiped away most union rights for most of the state's public employees. Today, Republicans in the state assembly did the same over the loud and vocal protests of those who had gathered outside the chamber, as well as the Democratic representatives inside the chamber.
We think what's happening in this building is what's ruining Wisconsin. When we completely ignore this institution and our rules and the laws, then democracy is completely melted down.
We have a 50-year tradition of collective bargaining, and in 4 weeks, we are having people say, no, this proposal ought to be adopted.
We are fighting for the people's rights. You know, everybody just take a second. Listen. I don't have to say anything. Listen to what's going on out here.
This is a stain on our democracy. It is a stain. It is a stain so deep, I don't know if it can ever be cleaned.
Despite the protests both inside and outside the Capitol, the Republican union stripping measure in Wisconsin passed today. Republican Governor Scott Walker has pledged to sign it into law as soon as possible. Wisconsin has been the focal point for the country these past 3 weeks, for good reason. In part, that's because the National Republican Party put the spotlight on the Wisconsin fight as the symbol of what the Republican Party nationally stands for now. But this fight and the pushback against it is actually happening now all over the country. These are images today from Boise, Idaho, of all places, where some union rights for teachers were stripped away this week by that state's Republican-led legislature. These are images from Columbus, Ohio, where thousands gathered in protest over the last few weeks against Republican-led efforts there to strip away union rights. These are images from Lansing, Michigan. The state capitol in Lansing reportedly saw its largest protests ever this week against union stripping measures and dramatic new unilateral powers being claimed by the state's Republican administration. In Michigan, they are expecting their biggest protest yet on Tuesday of next week. Who has called for the Tuesday protest in Lansing? The AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons. That's because part of what Republican Governor Rick Snyder is trying to do in Michigan is a massive transfer of wealth. He and the state's Republicans want to raise $1.7 billion by taxing poor people and old people, and also by taxing people who want to make donations to support public schools. From those groups, they are going to extract an extra $1.7 billion. But then they will not be applying that money to fix the state's budget. They will be giving that money away to businesses, a $1.8 billion corporate tax break, taxing the old and the poor in order to give that money to corporations. A spokesman for the AARP in Michigan telling the Detroit News today that seniors are willing to do their share, but they don't want to pay for a business tax cut. He accurately called what's going on in Michigan not a cut, but rather a shift. And that's exactly right, and that's important. What they are doing in Michigan with this particular tax hike will not make that state's budget deficit any better. It just shifts resources from one group of humans, old people and poor people, to corporations. It's just a shift of the resources that the state has control over. As you might imagine, this is not a popular kind of idea. Now, Florida is doing the same kind of shift with their schools, cutting hundreds of millions of dollars out of their K-12 education, not to pay down the state's budget deficit, but in order to give that money away to businesses. The money saved by sticking it to the school kids will be given away as a corporate and property tax break, and the state's deficit will stay as is, roughly. Shifting resources like this, reallocating resources, reallocating money from the poor, from kids, from old people, to businesses is not a very popular idea. There is a reason that people don't run for office by saying that's what they're going to do. Whether you're just looking at the protests or whether you're just looking at the polls, policies that hurt the great majority of people who work for a living in order to benefit a tiny corporate class, that creates two numerically unbalanced sides in your political debate. A lot of people get hurt, so a few people can benefit. Nobody runs a campaign saying they're going to do something like that. Nobody runs a campaign saying, I will raise taxes on the poor and cut their services so a comparatively tiny number of rich people can do even better than they're already doing. I mean, think about what would your campaign slogan be if that's what you were running on? Your campaign slogan would be, whoa. That doesn't go well on a bumper sticker. These are unpopular ideas. You don't run on this stuff. What's happened when Republicans decided to unleash policies like this on Wisconsin is that Wisconsin said no. And Wisconsin, I believe, won. The Republicans lost the debate on this. It remains to be seen whether they will pull this off in terms of a policy coup. Legal action is underway to try to block what Republicans did in the blink of an eye last night. But overall, Republicans lost the argument in Wisconsin. Wisconsin won. Greg Sargent at the Washington Post got an advanced look today on at the Wisconsin Republican recall effort. According to a poll soon to be released by Survey USA, in the district of Republican Senator Dan Kapanke, Republican senator, 57% of his constituents would now rather have someone else represent them in the state Senate, please. He is up for recall. In the district of Republican Senator Randy Hopper, 54% of his district would please rather have someone else represent them now. He's up for recall. That's not 54% of Democrats in the district. That's voters in the whole district. That's not Democrats. That's voters. That's everybody. That's everybody who just elected them in the first place just a couple of months ago. Facing that kind of political catastrophe of their own making in their own state. You want to know what Republican state senators in Wisconsin are planning for their next move? They literally ran out of the Wisconsin state capitol last night. They ran after they voted on their big union stripping bill. Where were they running to? Washington, D.C., where Wisconsin's Republican senators will soon be holding a fundraiser for themselves in the offices of a corporate lobbyist, a corporate lobbying firm, a firm called BGR. I am not kidding. The facts have a humorless liberal bias in this case. Overwhelming numbers of humans are against what they're doing, but at least they can take corporate comfort at their lobbyist fundraiser in Washington. And I mean, that's who's had their back throughout, right? Right now, Wisconsin Republicans are being defended with ads nationwide run by Karl Rove's Crossroads Group, a group that does not disclose its funders. But what we do know of Crossroads is that their top disclosed funders are corporations and individual billionaires. Crossroads GPS is running ads to support the Wisconsin Republicans and to deride those rich, awful public sector workers who they vaguely but ominously assert are making 42% more than you, probably. All over Wisconsin, the billionaire Koch brothers and their organization, Americans for Prosperity, have also had the Republicans back, running an ad that intones against government workers getting rich and living high on the hog at the expense of everyone else. Again, that's the Koch brothers Americans for Prosperity ad that has been running in Wisconsin. You know, there was really good news for the Koch brothers this week. Did you see that the new Forbes billionaires list came out? David and Charles Koch, probably the most aggressive and prolific right-wing activists in America today, individually, they are each tied for 18th richest man in the world, and their combined fortune would rank them at number 4, right behind Carlos Slim, Bill Gates, and Warren Buffett. This isn't them moving up in the ranks. They would have been 4th in the world last year, too. But just in the past year, good news. David and Charles Koch saw their wealth increase by $9 billion in 1 year. That's how much it went up. And remember, they don't really work. They inherited an oil and chemical company from their papa, but they made $9 billion in the past year doing the hard work of inheriting something. So number 1, Carlos Slim. Number 2, Bill Gates. Number 3, Warren Buffett. Number 4, the combined wealth of the Koch brothers. But this list turned out to also be good news for those of us here at the Rachel Maddow Show, because coming in at number 7 this year was Susie Jones, Kent Jones's mom. Number 7 on the billionaires list this year. She's a retired kindergarten teacher from Missouri. Way to go, Susie. Also number 9, she's apparently very secretive now, so no photo, but it's my 3rd grade public school teacher, Mrs. Marchant. She taught me 3rd grade at Chabot Elementary in Castro Valley, California. Of course, she's been making off like a bandit ever since. 9th richest person in the world. We're estimating her fortune at $27 billion. These public school teachers, I mean, You got to admire their wealth, but man, they are sucking us dry. In politics, if you are pursuing policies that mostly just redirect wealth and resources from the rest of the country to people who already have a lot, or policies that make things harder for people who have to work for a living, policies that transfer resources from public assets we all own and enjoy to something that only privately benefits a small number of people who frankly have already got a lot, those sorts of policies, again, they hurt a large number of people to help a small number of people. And because of that, it takes great, top-notch, expensive political strategy to distract from the my side versus your side numbers problem that you've got in terms of support for a policy like that. And so what you get for distraction is the crisis strategy. That's what we got in Wisconsin, right? Oh, I've been so looking forward to this. Ready? Does it work? Oh my God, it's a crisis. Oh my God, it's a crisis. We have a big budget deficit. We have a big budget crisis. We have to do really dramatic stuff to close the budget deficit. Do not ask us what we're going to do. There's no time. Can't you see it's a crisis? It's a crisis. I think you guys just want it to seem like a crisis. Otherwise, you wouldn't, in your first actions as governor, Scott Walker, have made the state's future budget deficit $140 million worse with business tax giveaways. But wait, it's a crisis. The unions are sucking us dry. The unions are very, very, very bad for the budget. No, you want it to seem like it's a crisis. But when the unions made every financial concession you demanded of them, you turned those concessions down. But wait, it's a crisis. The existence of unions themselves, that is the thing that is so expensive. No, you just want it to seem like a crisis. If the existence of unions themselves was so expensive, then why did you exempt the unions that supported you in the last election? Those unions have some of the most expensive benefits of any in your state, but you let them off. But wait, the protests against us, the protests themselves are a crisis. It's going to cost $7.5 million to clean up all the horrible damage that they've caused. Right, $7.5 million, or 95.3% less than that, depending on which day you asked and whether or not the governor wanted to make a crisis headline out of it that day or not. I mean, come on, remember the bond refinancing thing too? We have to end this right now or we won't be able to refinance our state debt. Remember that? They said the Democrats would have to return to the state by February 25th or the state wouldn't be able to refi. Millions of dollars would be lost. Turns out that wasn't really the deadline. They actually have until April to do it. And it turns out it costs money to refi anyway. It doesn't save them any money. So, when we called it a crisis before, turns out we sort of just like the siren. Ah-ooh, ah-ooh. There's no crisis. There's no crisis. The siren is awesome. There's no crisis. This is not about a crisis. This is not about the budget. This is not about bond refinancing. This is not about unions being expensive. This is about a massive reallocation of resources held in common by the citizens to corporations for their private gain. And it is about a tactical kneecapping of the political force that might resist that might resist what the Republicans are doing, a tactical kneecapping of the Democratic Party and its union base. The policies that Republicans in these states are pursuing right now are not popular. They attack people who work for a living, and most people work for a living. They attack the middle class, and they attack the institutions that make the middle class possible and that defend the middle class. The only problem the Republicans have got, the only roadblock in their way, the central weakness of their position is that whole, you might have heard of it, it's the one person, one vote thing, democracy. These policies that they're promoting benefit a few moneyed interests at the expense of a whole lot of humans. When you get national poll numbers that say 72% of people support firefighters' union rights, 66% of people support teachers' union rights nationally, that's not just liberals. This is a numerically unwinnable fight for anybody picking on firefighters and teachers like this. They may have the money on their side, but what they're up against is everyone who disagrees with them. They are pursuing policies that hurt way more people than they help. How do you get away with that in a one-person, one-vote system? You don't. So that's what they're going after next.